Kia ora, welcome everybody. Today we're looking at how barcoding can be used with Vernon, and there's a few different components of that. So barcodes are basically a font that is presenting some kind of text data in a different format that can work with a barcode scanner. Instead of seeing the number 1, there'll be a convention of different white and black bars, which then will be recognized by the scanner as that particular number. You can make use of a barcode font in something like Microsoft Word, and you can change any piece of text to be presented as a barcode, and that can then be read by a scanner. So within Vernon, there's a few parts that make that work. Firstly, you need a unique identifier for the object records you're talking about. So that would either be the system ID field, which is always present, or the accession number, if that's always unique in your system and doesn't include too many unusual punctuation characters. Secondly, we can generate barcode labels directly from Vernon, and that's using our integration with Microsoft Word Merge. Lastly, we can then make use of barcode scanners, either a USB scanner that's plugged directly into a laptop or a computer, or a Bluetooth scanner where you can be further away from the computer. And you can then scan those barcodes that have been either printed from Vernon or where they were pre-printed. And that can work anywhere where you've got a field that you can search on objects. So the quick search box or the object column in the bulk move screen are two examples of that. So today I'll be going through each of those different pieces and showing you how all of that connects together. So currently on my screen, I've got a set of barcode labels which have been generated directly from Vernon. So at the top of each of those labels, we can see a barcode, and that's actually, in my case, just the system ID. And I've highlighted that particular mail merge field and said to format it, instead of just being Arial font, for instance, to format it as a barcode using a free barcode font. So I'll go back to our demo system at this point. So I've got a set of 11 prints that I've already searched for. We can see at the top bar in Vernon that each of those already has a unique number, and that's the simplest thing to have within the barcode that we print. You could use the accession number, but some barcode scanners don't cope with some more obscure punctuation. So depending what punctuation you've got in your accession number, that might be problematic. And also for some sites, those accession numbers aren't always guaranteed to be unique. You might have historical duplicates, or you might have accession number ranges where there's a group record and subordinate records that might both be found when you try and scan that number. So those are two reasons why using the system ID and barcodes usually works better. So firstly, I'll show you how we can generate those barcodes from Vernon. I've already created a saved report, and we'll just see how that works. So I'll edit my report template, and we can see that it's selected as a Word Merge template. So it's integrating with a layout document that I've already pre-created in Microsoft Word. If I go into my formatting options, I can see that this report's already set up to use an existing layout, and that's the layout that generated that example that I first started with. So that particular layout document is in a report subfolder under Vernon, but it could be in any shared folder on your network. And I'll choose to modify the layout document. I'll then run that report, and because I've chosen to modify the layout document, we'll get a preview of how that layout is working. So this was the system ID field that I exported. If we look at that field, we can see that the font, rather than it being a typical font like Tahoma or Helvetica, it's using a free barcoding font called Free 3 of 9. So we've just searched for that in Google, we've downloaded that font, and we've installed it on this particular workstation. So 3 of 9 is a popular barcoding scanner. It's one that's supported by all common barcode scanners. So that's a typical format that would be used, but there's a few different competing barcode standards. So it depends on the particular barcode scanner that you're choosing to implement, what font would be the most appropriate. But certainly for 3 of 9 would be one that's widely supported and should just work out of the box. In my case, I've chosen to include other fields from the catalog record so that this barcode label will be human readable as well. So I'll have a barcode, but I won't be easily able to understand what that barcode represents. So I've chosen to also include the accession number, the title, and the ID field as text, so that when I'm looking at the barcode, it's obvious what record that is. That also provides us with a fallback option, because if the barcode is damaged anyway, and the barcode scanner can't scan that, you still know the system ID and the accession number of that object, and you could still, in that special case, type the ID number into a search field. I've also included the primary image for that record. So that isn't necessary, but again, that just makes it easy to look at that label and be sure I'm talking about the right object. So based on that, I'll just run that report. So because it includes images, we have to use the Vernon Systems Limited produce report macro. So that's a step where it goes and finds those original images and merges them into the final document. So we'll run that, we'll see it quickly go through the document, finding the image and adding it. And that's the same output that we saw when we started the session. So we've got the accession number, the title, and the ID field, and I had a little bit of text prefixing that to make it clear that that was the ID. I've pre-printed that, so I've got a copy of the same label here. And so then later on in this session, I'll show scanning those barcodes and making use of them in the system. At this point, I'd probably just want to print that off, and that might be on special paper. We might be laminating those, and then they could be attached to objects, either physically attached through some kind of conservation glue, or often they would be what are called swing tags, where you've got a small piece of cord where it's tied physically to an object. And so then it's easily removable in the future and doesn't damage the object in any way. In some cases, people use pre-printed barcodes, so they can be generated on high quality printers, and they can get a slightly better result because of that. Depending on the quality of your printer, you may have cases where the printing of the barcode is not sharp enough to be easily scanned by the barcode scanner. If you've got pre-printed barcodes, then what you can do is record the barcode number in the other ID field. So pre-printed barcodes will just have a long random number generated, and that's what's embedded in the barcode. And then that will be printed as human readable numbers underneath it. So you type whatever that unique number was. In the type column, you'd mark that that's a barcode number. And that other ID field is one of the key search fields in Vernon. So anywhere where you search objects, it's looking at the ID number, the accession number, and any other identifiers that are stored here. So adding the barcode number in this place would mean that the object can be searched using that barcode number anywhere else in the system. So now let's see those barcodes in action. So I've got a barcode scanner already here. So this is a popular type called Zebra. This one was about $200. It's a USB scanner. So it's got a long cable. In this case, it's got a cable that's 3 meters long. So you can have it plugged into a laptop, and you've still got some distance to move around if the object's not directly beside the laptop, for example. And so then I can just scan the barcode labels that we had into any field where I could do a search. So that could include the ID number here. So I already had those objects open. Let's just start with a blank identification screen, and I'll click into that search field. And so now I'll be able to use my barcode scanner. So that's found a direct match. So we heard the little beep as it scanned that. It's filled that into the search box. And because it was an ID number, it's found one exact match and it's opened that up. And so that's working because barcode scanners are treated as if they are just keyboard input into the computer. As far as the computer is concerned, whatever characters were detected in that barcode are just sent to the computer as if somebody had typed them. The barcode scanners can be configured as to whether an extra enter key is added to the end of that text automatically. And I have done that for our barcode scanner. So what's effectively happening in this case is it found the number 152 in that barcode. It sent that to the computer and typed that in, and then it automatically pressed the enter key, which did the search. And so that would work anywhere within the system. I could go to List Manager, for instance, and as long as I'm on a blank line, I can do the same thing and I can select individual objects and add them on there. And as long as I just keep arrowing down to different lines, I can keep adding more objects to that. So one place where that would be particularly useful is if you're keeping track of the movement of objects. That could be done through the bulk move screen in Vernon. So I might have a set of objects that are in a storeroom and I'm about to load them on a pallet to move to an exhibition area. I could go to the location functions bulk move screen. And the same as before, the object column here is a search field in Vernon. So just as long as the cursor is in that object field, I can do exactly the same thing as before. I can scan particular objects and I just have to use the cursor key to keep going down that list. And I could scan as many of those as I wanted. And then at that point, I would fill in the rest of the details of my move. So I might be recording why it's moving. So we know they're going to a temporary exhibition. And then the main details of the move. So in this case, maybe they're all going to the same gallery. And I could pick that from my location list. As I noted, if you had trouble with any of those barcodes, provided you've included some human readable text on that, you could still directly type into any field and add manually an object. That might also be the case if one object has lost its barcode. You can still easily then type in a reference number that's maybe marked on that object to add it into the bulk move with all of the others. So the last option that we have is that we can manage location moves in Vernon outside of the system. So that's particularly useful if you're in a location that has no connection back to the Vernon server. Maybe you're in a storage area and you just don't have Wi-Fi in that storage area. Vernon supports that through a built-in spreadsheet that allows you to do location moves and later import those moves back to Vernon when you're at your computer. That spreadsheet is available under the data folder in Vernon and then under the batch location or batch lock subfolder. So within there, you'll see a spreadsheet that's called batch lock. And that lets you do offline location recording. There's a little bit of setup work to get this working for your particular data. So we can see, for instance, in the location column, there's no available locations there. So there's one step that we have to do first while we're still connected to our network to export the list of valid locations and valid location reasons so that those will later be available to us offline. I do that from one of Vernon's menus, and that's under the Tools menu, Location Functions, and Export Location for offline work. You can also pre-populate that spreadsheet with a list of objects which can be used offline. We don't need to do that in this case, but that just lets you pick a saved list and export the basic details of those objects to that spreadsheet. So in my case, I'm just choosing this option. And so it's exported those as a file in that same batch lock folder. If I went back to that folder, it's just this location export folder we see here. And so there's a button now on the spreadsheet to import that information, and you can save it in the spreadsheet, and then the spreadsheet could be later moved to somewhere that isn't on the network. So you might have a USB stick where you plug it into a laptop later on, for example. So I'm going to click on the option to read the location and reason list. And that's now taken all of the reason codes and the locations, and they're just in special columns further to the right. I can now do a location move, and so we can move some of those same prints we moved before, but we could be doing this with no connection to wherever Vernon's set up on our network. The reason field now has access to the valid reason codes because we've already imported them into the spreadsheet. So I could say, well, some of those objects that I moved before are going to go back to maybe their usual location. And then like we had in Vernon, I can now use the barcode scanner. So I can pick up my barcode. Because we're not connected to Vernon, however, at this point, it doesn't have the Vernon database with all of the object details. So you are relying on making sure you're getting the right label that you're scanning, and then maybe reviewing that when it scans it to check that the number is correct. If you had several barcodes that were close together, for instance, you don't want to accidentally scan the wrong one. And so now I can just keep scanning more, and as I go down, it's just automatically moving to another line for me. So I've got 3 objects that I'm going to move, and I can just say where they're moving to. And so this pop-up now is populated by the locations that are available from Vernon. So I'll say those objects are moving back to maybe the storeroom. If they were all moving on the same date and time, then the date and time column here is just left blank. It'll just default to these ones, but we can override that if they were moved at different times for individual objects. So we'll say all of those were found in the storeroom. And so when I've finished, I can now export those location changes. So that's similar to the process we did in Vernon. It's just going to create a temporary file with all the movement details. So that's the movement export file we see here. So that's the only file that needs to be copied back to a shared drive that Vernon can access. So we might copy that to a USB stick, and then later, when we're able to at our computer, then import that into Vernon. So I've now come back to my computer where I'm using Vernon, and I'm ready to update those locations. To bring that information, and I go back to the location functions, and it's the batch location screen, which is where we can import that. So the batch location change screen lets us do a whole lot of diverse moves in one single step. So they could be moves where the objects are going to many different locations, unlike a bulk move where we move everything to the same place. So I'll go back to batch location change, and I'll use the import button here to open up that move export file. At that point, it's checking the ID numbers or the accession numbers that were recorded there. And because we're back in Vernon, it's able to look up the details for us. So we saw those as ID numbers in our offline location spreadsheet, but here we're back able to see the one-line summary for each of those. We can optionally record other information. So you might have notes about those moves, for instance. But we already have all the minimum information that we need. So I'll click OK on that. It'll tell me that it's defaulting things like the parts. And so that's gone through now. So we could go back to one of those objects and we'd be able to see the location updating. If I bring up object 152, which was that particular print, we'll be able to see that it's been moved back to the art storeroom, and that forms part of its location history. So that covers all of the different things that I wanted to show today with how barcodes can be used within Vernon. There's already a summary of these basic steps as a blog post on our website. And so on vernonsystems.com, you can do a search for the word barcodes and you'll find this existing case study on how Hagley Museum and Library in the US have used that approach. And so we can see photos of the barcodes that they've generated from Vernon attached to different objects, examples of the sheets as they come directly from the system, and then photos of the actual equipment they're using in that process. That completes today's webinar showcasing how we can make use of barcodes within Vernon CMS. Thank you very much for attending, and we look forward to seeing you in our next webinar.